The sound of my own laughter still echoes in my head as I stare at these legal papers scattered across my kitchen table. How did we get here? How did a simple joke about my husband's emotional distance turn into this nightmare of depositions, custody hearings, and family members choosing sides like we're in some twisted reality show? I'm Morwenna Pierce, 33 years old, and until 3 months ago, I thought I had everything figured out. I work as an office administrator at Henderson Marketing. Nothing glamorous, but it pays the bills. My husband Elliot is 35, an IT specialist who fixes computers and networks for small businesses around town. We've been married 8 years, have a 7-year-old daughter named Tess, and lived what I thought was a perfectly ordinary suburban life. The thing is, Elliot has always been cold, not mean, just distant. Like he's always thinking about server configurations or network protocols instead of, his actual wife sitting right next to him. He comes home, eats dinner mostly in silence, helps Tess with homework, watches some boring documentary, and goes to bed. Rinse and repeat, 5 days a week. Weekends aren't much better. That's where Jonas comes in. Jonas Field, 32, freelance graphic designer with the kind of easy smile that makes you forget you're married to a robot. We met when my company hired him for a rebranding project. While Elliot was explaining why our internet was running slow for the 1,000th time, Jonas was asking about my day, my dreams, whether I felt appreciated. The answer to that last question was a resounding no. It started innocent enough. Coffee meetings to discuss the project. Then coffee meetings after the project ended. Then longer coffee meetings that turned into afternoon walks. Then afternoon walks that turned into... Well, you get the picture. 3 weeks ago, my sister Jill came over for dinner. Jill's 29, works in social media marketing, and has never been married because, in her words, I refuse to settle for some emotionally unavailable man-child. She's always thought Elliot was wrong for me. We were sitting in the living room after dinner while Elliot helped Tess with her math homework at the kitchen table. I could hear his patient, monotone voice explaining fractions for the 3rd time. Tess was getting frustrated, and instead of comforting her, he just kept repeating the same explanation in that robotic way of his. God, does he ever show any emotion? Jill whispered, rolling her eyes. I glanced toward the kitchen where Elliot was drawing circles on Tess's notebook paper, his face completely neutral, even though our daughter was clearly upset. I don't think he knows how, I whispered back. Sometimes I wonder if he even has feelings. What do you mean? Like yesterday I told him about getting passed over for the promotion again, and he just said, "That's unfortunate," and went back to his laptop. That's it. No hug, no their loss, nothing. Jill shook her head. That's not normal, Morwenna. A husband should care when his wife is hurting. Right, Jonas would have... I caught myself, but Jill's eyebrows shot up. Jonas? Who's Jonas? My face went hot. Just this guy from work, freelancer we hired for the rebrand. And he would have what? I looked toward the kitchen again. Elliot was still explaining fractions in that same flat tone. He would have listened, actually listened, not just waited for me to stop talking so he could get back to whatever's more important. You like this Jonas guy? It wasn't a question. Jill has always been able to read me like a book. He's different. When I talk to him, I feel like what I'm saying actually matters, like I matter. How often do you talk to him? We get coffee sometimes, to discuss work stuff. Jill gave me a look. Work stuff. Okay, not always work stuff, but it's innocent. We just talk. From the kitchen came the sound of Tess's chair scraping against the floor. I don't understand, she said, her voice thick with tears. Why can't you just tell me the answer? Elliot's response was predictably unhelpful. Because you need to learn the process, not just memorize answers. Tess burst into tears and ran upstairs. Elliot just sat there for a moment, then quietly closed the math book and started clearing the dinner dishes like nothing had happened. Jesus, Jill muttered. Does he react to anything? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. I used to think he was just shy. Now I think he might actually be a robot. Like, maybe his company built him in their lab and forgot to install the emotion software. Jill snorted. The emotion software? That's perfect. Right. Sometimes I joke that I should check his back for a power cord. We both started giggling, and once we started, we couldn't stop. The stress of living with someone who treated me like a roommate he occasionally had sex with just bubbled up and came out as laughter. Oh my God, Jill gasped, wiping her eyes. You should tell him you're thinking about upgrading to a newer model, one with better emotional processing capabilities. Or at least one that comes with a user manual. Chapter 1. How to comfort your wife when she's upset. We were laughing so hard we didn't notice Elliot standing in the doorway until he cleared his throat. Tess is asking for you, he said to me, his face completely blank. She's upset about the math homework. I felt a flash of guilt, but then I remembered how he'd just let her run off crying without even trying to comfort her. Of course she's upset. You made her feel stupid. I was trying to help her understand. You were lecturing her like she's one of your computer problems to solve. Elliot looked at Jill, then back at me. Can we discuss this privately? Why? Because you don't want Jill to see how you really are. Something flickered across his face, but it was gone so fast I might have imagined it. I'll go check on Tess. After he left, Jill shook her head. Morwenna, honey, that man is going to drain the life out of you. You're 33, not 93. You deserve someone who actually cares about your feelings. I know, it's just... We have Tess and the house, and it's complicated. It's only complicated if you make it complicated. Life's too short to spend it with someone who treats you like furniture. Later that night, after Jill left and Tess was asleep, I was getting ready for bed when my phone buzzed. A text from Jonas. Hope you had a good evening. Thinking about our conversation today. You deserve so much better than settling for crumbs of affection. I smiled, feeling that warm flutter in my stomach that I never got from Elliot anymore. Jonas got it. He understood what it was like to feel invisible in your own life. I was about to text back when I heard a floorboard creak in the hallway. Through the crack under the bedroom door, I could see Elliot's shadow. How long had he been standing there? My phone buzzed again. Another text from Jonas. Miss you already? Same time tomorrow? I looked at the door, at that shadow that hadn't moved. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Can't wait, I typed back and hit send. The shadow in the hallway shifted, and I heard Elliot's footsteps moving toward the guest room. I should have felt guilty. Instead, I felt vindicated. If he was going to act like I didn't exist, why shouldn't I find someone who actually wanted to spend time with me? I had no idea that Elliot had been standing there long enough to hear everything Jill and I had said about him. No idea that my laughter at his expense had cut deeper than any fight we'd ever had. And I definitely had no idea that he was already starting to pay attention to things I thought he was too emotionally unavailable to notice. The next few weeks fell into a comfortable rhythm. Well, comfortable for me, anyway. I'd started staying late at the office twice a week to meet Jonas at the little coffee shop on 5th Street. It wasn't technically lying. I was staying late, just not for work reasons. Jonas had this way of making everything feel like an adventure. Even sitting in a cramped coffee shop that smelled like burnt espresso felt exciting when he was across from me, leaning forward with those intense green eyes, asking about my dreams and whether I'd ever thought about just starting over. You know what I love about you? He said during one of our Wednesday meetings. We'd moved from the table by the window to a corner booth that felt more private. You're not like other married women I know. You haven't given up on yourself. What do you mean? Most women your age, they just accept that the romance is dead. They settle into this routine of kids and mortgages and pretending they're happy. But you still want more. I stirred my latte, feeling that familiar warmth spread through my chest. Sometimes I feel selfish for wanting more. That's not selfish. That's human. He reached across the table and brushed his fingers against mine. You deserve to feel desired, appreciated, loved, not just tolerated. It was exactly what I needed to hear. At home, Elliot barely looked up when I walked into a room. But Jonas noticed everything. The new lipstick I'd bought, the way I'd started wearing my hair down instead of in the practical ponytail I'd defaulted to for years. The fact that I'd been smiling more. You're glowing lately, he told me that Wednesday. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. The problem was explaining my improved mood to Elliot. Not that he asked directly, but I could feel him watching me sometimes, like when I'd come home humming, or when I'd actually put effort into dinner instead of just heating up leftovers. You seem different, he said one Thursday night while we were cleaning up after dinner. Tess was in the living room watching cartoons. Different how? Happier, I guess. Did something good happen at work? I almost told him the truth. For a split second, I considered explaining that I'd been feeling invisible in our marriage and had found someone who actually listened to me. But then I looked at his face, that same neutral expression he wore when asking about my day or discussing grocery lists, and I realized he probably wouldn't even care. Just been trying to have a better attitude, I said instead. You know, focus on the positive. He nodded like that made perfect sense and went back to loading the dishwasher. The lies started small. I have to work late again tonight became my go-to excuse for meeting Jonas. It wasn't technically false. I was staying late, just not at the office. And it's not like Elliot ever questioned it. He'd just nod and say he'd handle dinner and Tess's bedtime routine. Sometimes I wondered if he was relieved to have me out of the house. My mum, Miriam, called one evening while I was getting ready for another late night at the office. You've been working so much overtime lately, she said. I hope they're paying you well for all those extra hours. They are, I lied smoothly. It's this big project, very demanding client. Well, I'm proud of you for being so dedicated. Your father always said hard work pays off in the end. The approval in her voice made me feel warm inside. When was the last time Elliot had been proud of me for anything? But Tess was starting to notice my absences. Why can't you help me with homework anymore? She asked one Tuesday night when I was rushing to get ready. Daddy can help you, sweetie. He's better at math anyway. But I want you to help me. I knelt down and smoothed her hair. I know, baby. Mommy just has a lot of work to do right now. But soon things will calm down, and we'll have more time together, okay? She nodded, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. A tiny stab of guilt hit me, but I pushed it away. I was doing this for all of us, in a way. A happier mom meant a happier family, right? Jonas had suggested we move our meetings to his studio apartment. It's more private, he'd said, and I could cook for you. When's the last time someone cooked for you? I couldn't remember. Elliot and I took turns with dinner, but it was always functional. Pasta and jarred sauce, grilled chicken and frozen vegetables. Nothing romantic or special. I don't know if that's a good idea, I'd said, even though every part of me wanted to say yes. Why? Because you're married to someone who doesn't appreciate you. Because it's complicated. Only if you make it complicated. He'd taken my hand then, right there in the coffee shop. Morwenna, you're amazing. You're funny and smart and beautiful, and you deserve to be with someone who sees that. Who tells you that? When I got home that night, Elliot was at his computer as usual. I stood behind his chair for a moment, waiting to see if he'd acknowledge me. He didn't even turn around. How was work? He asked, still typing. Fine, I said. Long day. Mm-hmm. That was it. No questions about what I'd been working on. No interest in why I'd been staying late so often. No concern about how tired I looked. Just, and the continued clicking of his keyboard. I went upstairs and took a long shower, and when I came out, I had 3 texts from Jonas. Thank you for tonight. You looked beautiful in that blue sweater. Sweet dreams, gorgeous. I smiled and typed back, you always know exactly what to say. Because I pay attention to you. You deserve that. He was right. I did deserve that. I deserved to feel wanted and appreciated and desired. If Elliot couldn't give me those things, why shouldn't I find them somewhere else? The next week, I said yes to dinner at Jonas's apartment. I'll have to work really late tomorrow, I told Elliot at breakfast. This client is being impossible about deadlines. Okay, he said, not looking up from his tablet where he was reading the news. I'll pick up Tess from school and handle dinner. You don't mind? Why would I mind? Because a normal husband might miss his wife. Because a normal husband might ask questions about why she's suddenly working so much overtime. Because a normal husband might show some interest in his wife's life. But Elliot just shrugged and went back to his tablet. That evening, I sat in Jonas's cozy apartment while he made pasta with homemade sauce and told me stories about his travels through Europe. He asked about my childhood, my dreams, what I'd wanted to be when I grew up. We talked for hours about books and movies and whether I'd ever thought about learning to paint. You have an artistic soul, he said, refilling my wine glass. I can see it in the way you describe things, the way you notice details. No one had ever called me artistic before. Elliot saw me as practical, efficient, good at organizing and managing schedules. But artistic, that was new. I used to write poetry in college, I admitted. Nothing good, but I enjoyed it. Do you still write? God, no. Who has time for poetry when you're dealing with mortgage payments and parent-teacher conferences? You could make time. You should make time. Don't let the mundane stuff kill the part of you that dreams. When I got home that night, it was almost 11. Elliot was still awake, sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop and what looked like bank statements spread out around him. You're up late, I said, kicking off my heels. Could say the same about you. He didn't look up from whatever he was reviewing. Rough day at the office? The client meeting ran long, then I had to finish up some reports. The lies were getting easier. He made a note on one of the papers. By the way, your mum called. Said she tried your cell, but it went to voicemail. My stomach dropped. I'd put my phone on silent during dinner with Jonas. Oh, I'll call her back tomorrow. Probably just wanted to chat. Probably. I waited for him to ask more questions, but he just kept working on whatever financial documents he was reviewing. Part of me wanted him to be suspicious, to demand to know where I'd really been. At least that would show he cared. Instead, he just sat there, completely absorbed in his spreadsheets or whatever, like my whereabouts were about as interesting to him as the weather forecast. I went upstairs and got ready for bed, and when I came back down to get some water, he was still at the table, now with a calculator out. Everything okay? I asked. Just reviewing our expenses, making sure we're staying on budget. Of course he was. Even at 11 at night, Elliot was thinking about practical things like budgets and expenses. When was the last time he'd stayed up late thinking about me? As I headed back upstairs, my phone buzzed with a text from Jonas. Thank you for tonight. You're even more incredible than I imagined. I smiled and typed back, thank you for making me feel special. You are special. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. I glanced back toward the kitchen, where I could still hear Elliot's calculator clicking away. No danger of that. Sunday dinner at Elliot's parents' house had been a monthly tradition since we got married. Barbara and Derek Pierce lived in a tidy ranch house about 20 minutes away, and every third Sunday, we'd drive over for pot roast and polite conversation about work and weather and Tess's school activities. I used to enjoy these dinners. Barbara was a good cook, and Derek told terrible dad jokes that made Tess giggle. But lately, I'd been dreading them. Sitting around that dining room table, pretending to be a happy family, while Elliot barely spoke, and I counted the minutes until we could leave. This particular Sunday, I was running late because Jonas had called just as I was getting ready. He'd been thinking about our conversation from the night before, about how I felt trapped in a life that didn't fit me anymore. You know what you need? He'd said. A weekend away, just the two of us, somewhere you can remember who you really are. The idea sent a thrill through me. I can't just disappear for a weekend. Why not? You're a grown woman. You deserve some happiness. It's complicated. Because of Elliot, the man who doesn't even notice when you're gone. He had a point. Elliot had barely reacted when I'd started working late. Would he even care if I went away for a weekend? Think about it, Jonas had said before hanging up. Life's too short to spend it being invisible. I was still thinking about it when we pulled into his parents' driveway. Elliot had been quieter than usual during the drive, and Tess had fallen asleep in the back seat. Should I wake her? I asked. Let her sleep a few more minutes. Elliot turned off the engine but didn't get out of the car. Morwenna, can I ask you something? My heart skipped. Sure. Are you happy? The question caught me off guard. Elliot never asked about feelings or emotions. What do you mean? I mean, are you happy? With us, with your life, with everything. I stared at him, trying to read his expression. His face was as neutral as always, but there was something in his eyes I couldn't identify. Why are you asking? You've seemed different lately. Distant. I just wondered if everything was okay. For a moment, I considered telling him the truth, that I felt like I was disappearing in our marriage, that I needed more than his polite indifference and mechanical routine, that I'd found someone who actually saw me as a person worth knowing. But then I looked at him sitting there, asking about my happiness like it was a technical problem he needed to troubleshoot, and the moment passed. I'm fine, I said, just stressed about work. He nodded like that explained everything. Okay, just, if you ever want to talk about anything, I'm here. I know. But that was the problem. He was here, but not really here. Present but not engaged. Available but not interested. We woke up Tess and headed inside, where Barbara had the table already set with her good china. She hugged Tess and Derek, gave Elliot a kiss on the cheek, and offered me a polite smile. How's work, dear? She asked as we sat down to dinner. Busy, I said. Lots of overtime lately. Oh, what kind of projects are keeping you so late? I felt Elliot's eyes on me. Just client stuff. You know how demanding some people can be. Barbara nodded, but there was something in her expression I didn't like. It must be hard on Elliot and Tess, having you gone so much in the evenings. Dad helps with homework, Tess piped up, but he's not as good at reading voices as Mom. Reading voices? Derek asked. You know, when we read stories and Mom does different voices for all the characters. Dad just reads in his regular voice. Everyone laughed, but I caught Barbara glancing at Elliot with what looked like sympathy. Well, I'm sure your mother will have more time for stories once this busy period at work is over, she said. Actually, it might get busier, I said without thinking. There's talk of a big project coming up that might require some travel. Elliot's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Travel? You didn't mention that. It's just preliminary discussions, nothing definite. Where would you be traveling to? Derek asked. I scrambled for an answer. Different cities, client meetings, that sort of thing. How exciting, Barbara said, but her tone suggested she found it anything but exciting. I hope it won't interfere too much with family time. I'm sure we'll manage, I said, feeling defensive. Elliot's perfectly capable of handling things while I'm working. Of course he is. I just think it's important for families to prioritize time together, especially when there are children involved. The criticism stung, partly because it was coming from someone who'd raised 3 successful kids, and partly because I knew she was right. But instead of acknowledging that, I felt my back go up. Some of us have to work for a living, I said. Not everyone has the luxury of being a stay-at-home wife. The table went quiet. Barbara had worked as a nurse until Derek's business took off, and she'd always been sensitive about the assumption that she'd never had a career. I worked for 15 years before staying home with the children, she said quietly. I didn't mean, I started, but Elliot cut me off. Morwenna's just stressed, he said. Work's been demanding lately. Right, I said, grateful for the save. Sorry, Barbara. I didn't mean to snap. She nodded. but the warmth had gone out of her eyes. The conversation moved on to safer topics: Tess's upcoming school play, Derek's golf game, the weather, but I could feel the tension simmering under the surface. Halfway through dessert, my phone buzzed with a text. I glanced at it without thinking. Jonas, missing you, can't wait to see you tomorrow. I quickly put the phone face down, but not before Barbara's sharp eyes caught the movement. Popular tonight, she observed. Just work stuff, I said quickly. On a Sunday evening? Clients don't really respect boundaries these days. Elliot was looking at me now, and I could see questions forming in his eyes. To deflect, I decided to go on the offensive. Speaking of boundaries, maybe we should talk about how some people think it's okay to comment on other people's work schedules. Morwenna, Elliot said quietly. No, it's fine. I get it. Some people think a woman's place is in the home, making sure everyone else is comfortable while she disappears into the background. That's not what anyone said, Derek interjected. Isn't it? Because it sure feels like I'm being judged for having ambitions beyond cooking and cleaning. You're being ridiculous, Barbara said, her patience clearly wearing thin. Am I? Or am I just refusing to apologize for wanting more out of life than being taken for granted? The words hung in the air like smoke. Tess looked confused and upset. Derek was studying his dessert plate. Barbara's mouth was set in a thin line. And Elliot was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. Maybe we should go, he said quietly. Good idea, I said, standing up. Thanks for dinner, Barbara. It was lovely, as always. The drive home was silent except for Tess asking why everyone seemed mad. Elliot told her that adults sometimes disagreed about things, but it didn't mean anyone was really angry. But I could feel his anger radiating from the driver's seat like heat from a furnace. When we got home and Tess was in bed, he finally spoke. What the hell was that about? What was what about? You were completely out of line tonight. My mother was trying to be supportive and you attacked her. She was judging me for working late, like I'm some terrible mother for having a career. She was not judging you, she was making conversation. Right, and I suppose you agree with her, that I should be home every night, cooking dinner and helping with homework like a good little wife? Elliot stared at me. Where is this coming from? You've never talked like this before. Maybe I'm just tired of pretending everything is fine when it's not. What's not fine? I looked at him standing there, genuinely confused, and felt a surge of frustration. How could he not see it? How could he not understand that I was drowning in our perfectly ordinary, perfectly boring life? Forget it, I said. You wouldn't understand. Try me. But I couldn't, because explaining would mean admitting that I'd been looking for something outside our marriage. And despite everything, I wasn't ready to blow up our life completely. I'm going to bed, I said instead. As I headed upstairs, my phone buzzed again. Another text from Jonas. Hope you're okay. You seemed upset when we talked earlier. I glanced back toward the living room, where I could hear Elliot moving around, probably straightening up the magazines and checking the locks like he did every night. Just family drama, I typed back. Nothing I can't handle. Want to talk about it tomorrow? Yes, definitely yes. Sweet dreams, beautiful. Tomorrow will be better. I smiled for the first time all evening. At least someone understood that I deserved better than this. I had no idea that Elliot had seen the smile on my face as I read that text, or that he'd been watching me more carefully than I realized, noticing the little changes in my behavior that I thought I'd been hiding so well. And I definitely didn't know that he'd already started documenting things. Little things. Like the fact that my work meetings never appeared on the shared calendar. Or that my mileage didn't match up with trips to the office. Or that he'd seen Jonas's name pop up on my phone screen more than once. The next few weeks felt like walking a tightrope. On one side was my real life. The one where I felt appreciated and desired and interesting. On the other side was my married life, the one where I felt like a ghost haunting my own house. Jonas and I had moved beyond coffee dates and dinners. We'd started meeting at his apartment regularly, and I'd gotten comfortable with the elaborate stories I had to tell to cover my absences. The marketing firm was expanding into new markets. There were client emergencies that required immediate attention. I was being considered for a promotion that required extra hours and dedication. The lies came so easily now that I almost believed them myself. "You're glowing," my sister Jill said when she came over for lunch on a Saturday. "Seriously, you look 10 years younger than you did a month ago." We were sitting in my kitchen while Elliot was outside mowing the lawn and Tess was at a friend's house. Through the window, I could see him methodically working his way across our small backyard, the same pattern every time, efficient and precise. "I've been taking better care of myself," I said. "New moisturizer, better sleep schedule." "It's more than that. You seem, I don't know, happier? More like your old self." She was right. I did feel more like myself. The self I'd been before marriage and mortgages and the slow suffocation of routine. Jonas saw that person, the one who used to write poetry and dream about traveling to Italy and stay up all night talking about books and art and the meaning of life. "Maybe I'm just finally growing into who I'm supposed to be," I said. "Good for you. God knows you deserve some happiness after years of living with Mr. Personality out there." We both glanced toward the window where Elliot was emptying the grass catcher with his usual mechanical efficiency. "Has he always been so," Jill searched for the word, "boring?" I was going to say emotionally constipated, but boring works too. I laughed. "He wasn't always this bad. When we were dating, he was just quiet. I thought it was mysterious. Turned out it was just him having nothing interesting to say." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't settled down so young?" "All the time, actually, especially lately." "Sometimes." "You were only 25 when you got married. That's barely an adult. You had no idea who you really were yet. And now I do. Don't you?" I thought about the woman I became when I was with Jonas. Confident, interesting, worth listening to. Maybe I'm starting to. My phone buzzed with a text. "Jonas, thinking about you. Wish you were here." I smiled without thinking, and Jill caught it. "Okay, spill. Who is he?" "Who is who?" "The guy who's making you smile like that. And don't say it's work because nobody gets that dreamy look from spreadsheets." I glanced toward the window again. Elliot was still mowing, completely oblivious to what was happening inside his own house. Just like always. "Remember Jonas, the graphic designer I mentioned? The one who actually listens to you? We've been spending time together." Jill's eyebrows shot up. "What kind of time?" "Just talking, getting coffee, having dinner sometimes." "Morwenna, it's not what you think, we're just friends. Friends who text each other on Saturday afternoons." I sighed. "Okay, maybe it's a little more complicated than friendship." "Are you sleeping with him?" "Jill, that's not an answer." I looked out at Elliot again, pushing the mower in his perfectly straight lines, and felt a familiar surge of resentment. When was the last time he'd texted me just to say he was thinking about me? When was the last time he'd looked at me the way Jonas did? "Not yet," I said quietly. "But you want to." "I want to feel alive again. I want to remember what it's like to be with someone who actually wants to be with me." "Then why don't you?" "Because I'm married, because we have Tess, because it's complicated." "It's only complicated if you make it complicated. You're 33 years old, Morwenna. You could have another 40 years ahead of you. Do you really want to spend them feeling invisible?" Before I could answer, the back door opened and Elliot came in, grass stains on his jeans and sweat on his forehead. "Hey, Jill," he said, grabbing a water bottle from the fridge. "How's work?" "Can't complain. How's the IT business?" "Busy. Seems like everyone's computer breaks down at the same time." He drank his water and headed toward the stairs. "I'm going to grab a shower. Let me know if you need anything." After he left, Jill shook her head. "Does he ever ask about you? Like, how you're doing? What you're thinking about, whether you're happy. He asked me that once recently, whether I was happy. And what did you tell him? That I was fine. Were you lying? I thought about it. Probably. And he just accepted that. Didn't push or ask follow-up questions. This is Elliot we're talking about. Emotional depth isn't exactly his strong suit. That's not normal, you know. A husband should care about his wife's emotional state. He should notice when something's wrong. Maybe he does notice and just doesn't know what to do about it. Or maybe he doesn't notice because he's too wrapped up in his own little world to pay attention to anyone else. I wanted to defend him, but I couldn't think of any evidence to contradict her. When was the last time Elliot had asked about my day and actually listened to the answer? When was the last time he'd noticed that I'd gotten my hair cut or bought a new dress or was upset about something? Jonas notices everything, I said without thinking. Of course he does, because he's interested in you as a person, not just as someone who splits the mortgage and helps with childcare. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo from Jonas, a sunset view from his apartment balcony with the message, "Wish you were here to see this with me." He sends you pictures? Sometimes. When's the last time Elliot sent you a picture of anything other than a grocery list? Never. The answer was never. That evening, after Jill left and Tess was in bed, I was loading the dishwasher when Elliot came into the kitchen. "Everything okay?" he asked. "You seem quiet tonight." "Just thinking." "About what?" I almost told him. About how lonely I felt in our marriage. About how I needed more than his polite indifference and predictable routine. About how I'd found someone who made me feel like I mattered. Instead, I said, "Work stuff. This new project is really demanding." "The one that might require travel?" "Yeah, that one." He nodded and started wiping down the counters. "When would the travel start?" "Soon, maybe. Why?" "Just wondering how to plan around it. For Tess's schedule and everything." Of course. Always practical, always planning, never emotional. Never asking how I felt about traveling, or whether I was nervous or excited. Just logistics and schedules, and who would handle carpool duty. "I'll let you know when I know more," I said. "Okay." He finished with the counters and headed toward his computer. "I'll be working for a while, if you need anything." I watched him settle into his chair, already absorbed in whatever technical problem he was solving, and felt that familiar wave of invisibility wash over me. My phone buzzed. "Jonas. Can't stop thinking about this afternoon. You're amazing, you know that." This afternoon, when I'd told him I was going grocery shopping, but had actually spent 2 hours at his apartment, talking about art and poetry, and whether it was possible to start over at 33. "You make me feel amazing," I typed back. "Because you are. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." I glanced toward the living room, where I could hear Elliot's fingers clicking across his keyboard, completely unaware that his wife was falling for someone else right under his nose. "I won't," I typed, but what I didn't know was that Elliot wasn't as unaware as I thought, that he'd been paying attention to things I assumed he was too self-absorbed to notice, like the fact that my grocery runs had gotten longer, but the groceries hadn't gotten more interesting, or that I'd started dressing differently on days when I claimed to be working late, or that he'd started checking our phone records and had noticed a number that appeared with increasing frequency, a number that belonged to Jonas Field. He'd even driven by Jonas's apartment complex one evening when I was supposedly at a client meeting and had seen my car parked in the visitor's lot. But Elliot being Elliot, he didn't confront me with accusations or emotional outbursts. Instead, he did what he always did. He gathered data. He documented patterns. He built a case. And he started making plans of his own. Things came to a head on a Thursday night in November. I'd told Elliot I had a late client meeting, but I was at Jonas's apartment, wine in hand, curled on his couch while he showed me photos of a secluded bed and breakfast upstate. "Friday evening through Sunday," he said. "Very private, very romantic. Tell Elliot it's a mandatory work conference." The idea thrilled and terrified me. A whole weekend without lies to juggle, without rushing home. What if he gets suspicious? Morwenna, he barely notices when you're gone for an evening. He'll buy it. Jonas was right. Elliot had accepted every excuse. Overtime, client dinners, without question, content to handle dinner and bedtime while I was working. I got home near 10:30. Elliot sat at the kitchen table, papers spread out, bank statements, credit card bills, phone records. "Hey," I said casually. "What's all this?" "Just reviewing expenses." He didn't look up. "Some charges I don't recognize. Coffee shops, restaurants, a lot of them." My pulse spiked. "Client meetings. You know how it is." "Right, the company reimburses those, doesn't it?" "Eventually." That sound carried skepticism, not his usual indifference. In the shower, I told myself it was nothing. Restaurant tabs were normal for late nights. But when I came down for water, he was cross-referencing phone records with charges, laptop open. "Timeline for reimbursements," he said when I asked. He was lying. I could feel it. The next morning, he was gone before I woke. No note, no text. At work, I was jumpy, expecting accusations that never came. Jonas noticed over coffee. "You seem tense." "Elliot's asking questions about my schedule. He might suspect." "Maybe it's time to stop hiding," Jonas said, squeezing my hand. "You deserve happiness." Tess would adjust. Kids are resilient. That evening, Elliot helped Tess with a papier-mâché volcano while she chatted excitedly. "How was work?" he asked evenly. "Fine." I announced my conference next weekend, Friday to Sunday, mandatory for advancement. Tess asked about pancakes. Elliot promised them. "Go," he said when I pressed, "if it's important." But his eyes said otherwise. That night, packing, he appeared in the doorway. "Are you having an affair?" The question stole my breath. "What? No, why would you—" "You've been lying. Stories don't add up. You're distant, secretive, happy, but not with us." I laughed, sharp, defensive. "An affair? When would I have time between work, Tess, this house?" "Tell me." "You're paranoid. Hard work and ambition don't mean cheating." "Then explain your boss calling, saying you left early yesterday when you told me you were working late." Panic surged. I snapped. "After 8 years, this is what you think of me. If you don't trust me, that's on you." He stepped closer. "I think you're unhappy, and looking elsewhere to fix it. Maybe if you paid attention to your wife instead of spreadsheets, I wouldn't need to. So there is someone else. A friend who actually listens, who makes me feel seen." He went still. "Don't go to this conference. Stay. Let's talk." "There's nothing to talk about." I grabbed my suitcase and left, driving to Jonas's in tears. He held me, promised the weekend away would clarify everything. "You deserve better than a roommate." What I didn't know, Elliot had recorded our fight. He'd been compiling evidence for months, records, statements, photos of my car at Jonas's. While I cried on Jonas's shoulder, Elliot uploaded it all to a secure server and contacted a lawyer. I thought I was finally choosing myself. I had no idea he was already building an airtight case. That weekend with Jonas at the bed and breakfast felt like stepping into a different life. Carefree walks through quaint towns, lingering dinners, whispered fantasies of leaving everything behind. Sunday morning, sunlight spilling across the sheets, Jonas traced my arm. "You could leave him. People do it every day. Tess would adjust. Kids are resilient." I murmured something non-committal, but the words lodged in my chest like stones. When I returned home Sunday evening, the house was unnaturally still. Elliot's car sat in the driveway, but no TV murmured, no child's laughter echoed. I found him in the kitchen, coffee gone cold, a thick manila folder on the table. "Tess is at my parents'," he said before I could speak. "Sit down, Morwenna." His voice carried unfamiliar steel. I sat. He opened the folder methodically. Phone records, credit card statements, Photos of my car outside Jonas's building, different days, different angles, GPS logs, recovered texts, including the one I'd deleted. Can't wait to escape my boring husband for a real weekend with you. I'm an IT specialist, he said quietly. I know how to follow digital trails. I've tracked everything for months. My stomach plummeted. You spied on me. I documented the truth when my wife started lying and using joint money to fund hotel rooms and dinners for her boyfriend. $2,347. That was supposed to be for Tessa's future. He slid Jonas's Instagram screenshots across the table, photos from his apartment, my coffee cup visible, captions bragging about his beautiful married woman ready to leave her dull husband. He's already posting about someone new, Elliot added. Married women are apparently his type. I felt the room tilt. Elliot, I've filed for divorce, full custody of Tess, with supervised visitation for you until you prove you can prioritize her. Papers served tomorrow. The words landed like blows. You can't take my daughter. I can protect her from a mother who lies about work conferences while she's in another man's bed, who misses school plays and soccer pickups because she's distracted texting her lover. Each fact stung because it was true. I had been absent, even when present. I've made mistakes, I whispered, but I love her. Then end the affair, get therapy, show the court you can put Tess first. Otherwise, you'll see her every other weekend, supervised, and pay child support. He gathered the folders. I gave you chances to come clean. You chose lies. Now live with the consequences. After he left, my phone buzzed. Jonas. How did it go? Ready to celebrate your freedom? I stared at the screen, then at the empty kitchen. The evidence of my choices spread like a crime scene. I'd dismissed Elliot as passive, predictable, boring. I'd convinced myself I deserved passion, excitement, a life that sparkled. Instead, I'd traded a steady marriage, daily motherhood, and my daughter's trust for a man who documented our affair online like a trophy and vanished at the first hint of real stakes. Elliot hadn't just noticed, he'd prepared. While I chased fantasy, he protected what mattered. Now the fantasy was gone, and all that remained was regret, a custody battle, and the long, quiet realization that I'd destroyed the very security I'd once mocked. I was finally free, and I had never felt more trapped.